Good morning. Good morning to all the loyal students. So we left off in the middle of Osid Gimel. So I think we'll start from the beginning of Osid Gimel, just so that we get the flow of it again. We'll go over it briefly and then continue from where we left off yesterday. So first you described the Avodah Mitech Simcha, how a person davens, and in davening, he serves Hashem with Simcha. And now he's going to describe the other path where a person davens, and what he motivates, the feelings he generates is more humility. Von Bittel. So now we're up to the second one. Raif and Abbey is the second path. I think there's a message there. I don't understand the message. Something about a plug.
We start?
Means anything?
No.
No. Okay, so leave it.
We start.
Raif and Abezu Avodah b'chinas shiflus davka. The second path of Avodah is in a way of shiflus, humility, and b'chinas merirus, where he feels bitterness, arichukai Hashem, from the fact that he's so distant from Hashem. And what is the thought process that leads to this feeling? Like you said, it's the mind of the heart. A person makes an accounting, and he thinks about all the thoughts, all the words that came out of his mouth, and all his actions. Even things that were permissible, there are no issues with Aveira, but they're not connected to Hashem. The other way Chassidus explains, anything that has any substance outside of Hashem, by definition, is klipa. It's not evil the way we know it, but it's klipa the way it's understood in Chassidus, something which conceals godliness. So a person thinks the conversations I had, comments that I made, thoughts that I had, and actions that I did, were they all directed to Hashem, or they had other destinations that have nothing to do with Hashem? It's not an Isur, but Dvarim Amutarim Sheinun L'Shem Shamayim. It's all talking about permissible things, but Einam L'Shem Shamayim, they're not directed towards Hashem. And then he goes on to think about himself, about the good that he does, the Torah that he studies, the mitzvahs that he observes, and he realizes that it's not the way it should be, which means the kol mitzvah. He's not talking about that he's not putting on the tefillin right, or not eating the matzah the way he's supposed to, the right amount, or the right time. Action is doing it right, but the kavanah, the intention behind it. The kol mitzvah yesh ba kavanah pratis ba'avodah. Every mitzvah that we observe has a certain intention that Hashem wanted us to do this mitzvah, that it should refine us in a specific way. Like we just learned last week, the Mamar of the Likutei Torah, that the advantage of learning and knowing the 613 mitzvahs in our head, what they are, because then the 613 mitzvahs, they all will shine their light when I learn about it on the 613 parts of my neshama and my guf. So each mitzvah has a kavanah that is supposed to refine me in a very specific area. For example, tefillin, the Shabbat halev hameich. Tefillin is about being meshabet, to subjugate, to dedicate my mind and my heart, to dedicate it to Hashem. It's like when a person takes on a position of leadership, whether it's a president of the United States and probably other lower positions of leaderships, they take an oath which is basically, I am dedicating myself sincerely and truly to this public service. People who take an oath in a marriage, it's basically declaring that they're dedicating themselves to one another. So the union of tefillin is the Shabbat halev hameich. I'm telling Hashem, which I put on the tefillin on my brain, on my head, and my heart. I'm dedicating my heart and my brain to Hashem. No one asked me the question yesterday. I'm sure you all know the answer. And in case there's somebody listening that does know the answer, I'll ask the question and give the answer. And that is, we don't put the tefillin on the heart. We put it on the arm. Oh, so the answer is it's supposed to be on the arm pointing to the heart. It has to actually be tilted to point to the heart. So why don't we tie it onto the heart itself?
Because your heart has to motivate your actions.
Right. You can't answer because it'll look funny if you tie tefillin onto your heart, because the tefillin also look funny. Once you get used to it, we're used to it. So the reason is that the heart is not enough, it has to lead to action. So we tie it on the hand, represents action opposite the heart. Yep.
Like trying to subjugate the mind and the heart it's a really good thing. So how come like women are not good in this? Like they can't really do that with the feelings. So.
You can answer the question in reverse. You have to subjugate your mind and your heart, which is something internal. So why is it done through tying something, a box on my hand, on my head? Just sit down and meditate and connect yourself. And in fact, that's why there are people that are supposedly spiritual people, and they don't understand what all these mitzvahs are about, these rituals. They actually detract from focusing and concentrating on the inner part to it. The inner is a deep inner dedication, devotion, love, and we're focusing on putting the box here, putting the box there. So Heichaltzu explains it is that women are naturally more in tune spiritually, and therefore they don't need to do the physical act of the tefillin in order to generate those feelings. And a man needs it. Plus the fact that when the men put on tefillin, it affects everybody, it affects the whole world. It certainly affects the woman that they're connected to, whether it's the wife, whether it's their daughters, but everyone is affected by one another. So it's like a person who eats with his mouth, even though he's eating with his mouth and it's going into his digestive system, but it brings strength to the entire body. And things that I see with my eyes, things I hear with my ears, it's a certain organ that's actually involved, but it affects the whole body. And that's the way it is with mitzvahs as well. But the general answer is that women, Hashem created women in a way that naturally they're more tuned in, they have more sensitivity to spirituality. Yep.
Is there actually a source emphasis? Like, what is the source of that? That's why we don't fulfill it, or is this just like more of a?
No, there's a source. I know what the next question is. Where's the source?
Yeah, that was, no, I already.
I guessed it. I think it's a maimon we actually learn here in class. I could look it up later. We have it downstairs. It's a maimon from the Rabbi Marash, and the maimon is about understanding Rosh Chodesh. And he speaks about how Rosh Chodesh is yontif for women. And in that maimon, I'm pretty sure that's where he brings this point, and probably the sources, that women are more sensitive spiritually than men.
Okay, Rabbi, I don't need to know the source. I have enough on my plate. I don't want to do please.
Actually, there are some exceptions that they do have to put on tefillin. I'm just joking.
Be careful.
I'm gonna say Rashi's daughter. but-
Right, Rashi's daughter is put on tefillin. Okay, so if you start poking too much, you're gonna get into
I
trouble.
think Zohar is
I'm
that
happy
just-
where I am.
It's also expensive. It's about $1,200 a pair of
Tell me
tefillin.
about it. It's a
Is
good
there a
thing for my
source
brother.
for Rocky's daughter's putting on
I'm sure there's a source.
What's
Question
the
is
source?
where.
I'll just leave class and then when you finish, they'll come.
But if it was just that we were more.
Okay.
sensitive and we went through a lot of things.
The daled min shebelulav and the minim of lulav, the lulav esrog and the four species, which is the dasim and arabis, is it should be achdus, and we explained it yesterday. And the word esrog is actually a Rosh Tevis, the four letters, a pasuk and tilim, al tivieni, rego gaiva. Hashem, please help me that I shouldn't even have the foot of arrogance, meaning say I shouldn't even have one iota of arrogance. And that's what the dogmen are all about, bittul and unity. And besides the fact that every mitzvah specifically has a specific purpose, intention, that I have to, through observing this mitzvah, this helps me refine a certain aspect of my personality. There's a certain general kavanah, and this general kavanah is sort of a common denominator in all mitzvahs, and that is the purpose of just accepting the yoke of Hashem's kingdom, which basically means just connecting to Hashem. It really makes no difference how I'm connecting, in which way I'm connecting, which part of my body is connecting. It's just the idea of connecting. So now, I think this is pretty much where we left off. If he doesn't observe the mitzvah this way, with these thoughts in mind, and he does the mitzvah in a cold way. What does cold mean? This phrase is actually found somewhere in Tanakh. They have the reference here probably, Yeshayahu, where he's rebuking the people that they're doing mitzvahs, but they're doing it mitzvahs anoshim ulamada, which means you're doing it like by rote. You grew up this way, you're just doing it, there's no feeling, there's no emotion, there's no neshama to the mitzvahs. In that case, so it means, even though I'm doing the mitzvahs, but not the way it should be. There's much more that I could invest in doing the mitzvah than I am. Especially when a person will meditate on the greatness of Hashem and understand more how great Hashem is, and then this thought process that I'm not doing the mitzvahs properly, it's not adequate, is going to be even stronger. Considering the greatness of Hashem, the awesomeness of Hashem, the exaltness of Hashem, even if I do my avodah with the proper thought process and the proper investing of emotion, it's still not sort of adequate when you're thinking of who are you serving. Not only it's not proper, but the chet choshev, what I'm doing could be almost considered like a sin. How could that be? When you're talking about a king, a great, awesome king, we find this expression a lot because I guess there could be different kinds of king. There could be a king who's a king over 5,000 people, and there could be a king who's over 100,000 people, and there could be a king who's a king over 5 million people. And when a king rules over a much greater country, he's a greater king. And then there could be kings that they're sitting on the throne, but they're not known for any special wisdom or skills or talents or whatever. Or you could have a king like Shlomo HaMelech. So you have a king that's a great and awesome king. If you serve him, but you're not serving him in a way that's befitting his stature. Not only that you're not serving him properly, it's actually demeaning. It's an offense. Every avodah has to be in a way that it's in proportion to the one that you're serving. You can't compare the way you serve a simple person. So you're doing something for an ordinary person. This is a parent, or this is your boss at work, or this is just somebody who's some sort of an authority in your city, and you're serving him, or you're serving someone that's a king. In fact, if he would serve the king in a manner which is the same way, he does the same things that he does to Adam Pasha, to a simple person, not only this wouldn't be considered service, but it would be considered a sin. And not only that, committed b'malchus would be a rebellious act. Shamash b'kveda, he is in some ways desecrating his honor. It's demeaning for the king. It's something which is an offense, an insult. The Gemara says, and this is the reason for the halacha, man de machve b'macha kodom malka, if a person is standing in front of the king, face to face to the king, in the king's chamber, and while you're standing in front of him, you make some sort of a nuance to someone else, like blink with your eye or something with your finger, like I'll see you soon, just something like that. You're not talking. You didn't pull out your New York Times, start reading your newspaper in front of the king. You didn't take off your shoes to relax. You're standing in front of him and you just make some sort of emotion to another person. According to halacha, this person was chayav b'nafshe, he could lose his life. That's an act of rebellion, because in front of the king, nothing else has to exist. And if you're giving attention to someone else outside of the king while you're face to face with the king, that's an act of rebellion. Is this the same with other people? Of course not. I mean, in a marriage, we have a problem sometimes. The wife is trying to talk to the husband and he's on his cell phone. Or the husband trying to talk to the wife and she's on her cell phone. Okay, I'm not paying attention to you. That's a big thing. But if a person is talking to someone, and by the way, they motion to someone or say something, a nuance, that's normal. But to do the same thing in front of a melech, not only it's not normal, it's considered disrespectful. I mentioned the other day that, there are people that have a nice, casual relationship with their rabbi. And you see this often if you ever were in a place where there's a rabbi of a Chabad house, or a rabbi of a shul, and people walk over and they slap the rabbi in the back. Hi, rabbi, I haven't seen you for a while. It's good to see you. Everybody's smiling. There's nothing wrong. If the person would come to the Rebbe and chas v'sholom do that to the Rebbe, that would be the height of disrespect. He might not realize it because he doesn't know the difference, but it was okay when I did it there because that's an ordinary rabbi, not a Rebbe. So I remember once in class, I asked girls, give me an example. So one girl gave a nice example, but maybe someone here can give me some more examples. But she said that today we have beautiful, beautiful disposable dishes. Really beautiful. You can walk in and you think that it's China. Everything is set, different colors, and it looked like it's beautiful. So imagine you're doing a Sheva Bracha for somebody and you buy the most expensive of these plastic disposable dishes. Everybody's walking, wow, this is amazing, it's beautiful. But imagine if you get information that the Melech is coming to visit your house, prepare a supper for the king, and you prepare disposable dishes. That would be an offense. The king is coming, you have to get dishes and things that are made of gold and silver, dishes that are china, dishes that are appropriate for a king. You can't get paper dishes or disposable dishes. It's so inappropriate. So basically, not only I'm not doing it the way it should be, it's actually an offense under these circumstances. So this is what the person's thinking to himself. I davened, I learned, I did mitzvahs, this is what I was thinking. But the way I did it, not only it's not up to par the way it should have been, but the way I understand Hashem, what I did is actually almost like an offense because it's not really serving Hashem properly. And this will help us understand the way we relate to Hashem. I'm at the bottom of page 101. That in comparison to the greatness of Hashem, to the awesomeness of Hashem, and how exalted He is, and He's infinite. If I think of all that, and turn to page 102, Asher ein chekel v'gdolosei, that is no, Hashem is unfathomable. You can't even begin to understand His greatness. Then you realize Gam Avedis Tzadikim Hayesek Delim, even the service of the greatest tzaddikim, Einam Berach Eitzim Gdolosei Klal. That doesn't compare. It doesn't match up to Aveda for Hashem. So therefore, even a person who's on the level of a tzaddik, if he would meditate on this, he would find also and think that my Aveda is not the way it should be. On the contrary, dafka because the tzaddik understands Hashem's greatness so much more than we do, he feels how what I did is nothing. I remember somebody was once talking to me. They were telling me that they did a mitzvah, and they really enjoyed when they did it. This is a young teenager, and they felt good about themselves that they did the mitzvah with a certain degree of pleasure. Shortly after that, their friends called. They were going somewhere. I forgot what it was. Whether it was playing a game or to a restaurant. They said, "Oh," and then I knew what real pleasure is all about. I realized the pleasure I felt when I did the mitzvah is a joke compared to the pleasure that I had from this gashmistic activity that I was involved with. Yep.
I learned that dafka right after you do a mitzvah, that's the time when you're most susceptible to create horror, like patting you on the back for doing it. Like that's what you want.
Yeah. Okay. But in this case, it helped the person.
I thought you were saying that he realized that you're saying he liked the mitzvah better than the restaurant?
No, the opposite.
That's what I thought. So what's the point then?
The point are that when you talk about having a feeling and a pleasure and a joy for something, there are levels and levels and layers of depth. When he started to compare how much he enjoyed the davening or the mitzvah and how much he enjoyed whatever gashmis activity he was involved with, he realized that there's a big gap between the two. What I thought was enjoyment doesn't compare.
Are we even supposed to be comparing? We probably we're not.
We're not saying that we're supposed to. We're talking about this person who's following this particular path. These are the thoughts. This is the reason why everybody means even tzaddikim, during a Sefer Tshuva are supposed to say Ashamnu Bagadnu, which is the confession. Gam tzaddik gomer k'mei Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom. Could you imagine someone like Moshe Rabbeinu should say Ashamnu Bagadnu Gazalnu Hayitzarach Leima Viduyim B'Aseres Yemei Tshuva. He said this during Aseres Yemei Tshuva. Behind the reason is because in light of his greatness and the true understanding of Hashem's exaltedness, Gam Aveda Mitas, even the Aveda of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chet Yechoshev was considered that there was something wrong. It wasn't up to par the way it's supposed to be. And this is the deeper meaning to what troubles many people, where it says in Gemara, I think they write something about it here. You might find it in the notes. It says in Gemara, Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechtel. There is no such thing as a tzaddik that can do good and is not sinning. Everybody is human, therefore nothing is perfect. Nobody's perfect. How does that consistent? I can reconcile that statement with what it says in Tanya, that even someone who's not a tzaddik, he's a beinoni, he doesn't sin. And if he does, he's not a beinoni. So the beinoni is someone who doesn't have any averis, not in thought, not in speech, not in action. Remember, not only not in action, not only not in speech, not even in thought doesn't he do an avera. And here it says, Ein tzaddik bar, there is no such thing as a tzaddik. And then people, make reference to the story in Chumash with Avraham Avinu, and there's a story in Chumash with Moshe Rabbeinu, and there's a story in Tanakh with David HaMelech, and with Shlomo Melech and different tzaddikim, and doesn't that prove? But the main thing is there's a statement that says there is no such thing as a tzaddik that does only good and doesn't have any sin. So the way Chassidus explains it is, of course, when the Torah describes these tzaddikim, there's much more depth to the story. It's not what it appears to be on the surface. But what do we do with this statement? And the answer is the word Avera has different words. Sometimes it's Chet, sometimes it's Oven, sometimes it's Avera, Pesha, there are different terms. The word Chet has another translation. And that they bring here in the footnote, that Chet can also come from the word lacking. Like there's a pasuk, Ani ubni shleim chatoim. David HaMelech's wife, Bathsheba, told him that if you do this and this, then Shlomo, my son, will be missing something, will be lacking in terms of the kingdom. So, but there's another pasuk where it says to shoot an arrow to the target, not to miss. So the word chet means missing something. There is no such thing as a tzaddik that he serves Hashem and he reaches a point where it's the absolute perfection and there's nothing missing. It's impossible.
Hashem is infinite.
Because Hashem is infinite. So no matter how much avodah the person does, it still can't reach infinity. So there's something incomplete. But if that's the case, so again, are we saying that the tzaddik is not serving Hashem properly? The answer is no. The tzaddik serves Hashem and does all the avodah to the epitome of what he can do Sunday. But it's not reaching the perfection of Hashem, but it's reaching the perfection of what his capabilities are. Tomorrow's a new day. Has new keiches, new potential. So now, tomorrow he learns more about Hashem, a new understanding. So he serves Hashem more. And this is the way it goes from day to day. And the Rebbe brings the example of the Hanukkah candles. I light 2 candles on the second day of Hanukkah. And would somebody say, but you're not doing the mitzvah properly because there's 8 candles? No, on Hanukkah, on the second night, I can't light more than 2. And by lighting 2, I did the whole mitzvah. But now the third day, it's a new day, there's another candle to light. The fourth day, there's another candle to light. So therefore, it means that every day as the tzaddik goes on with his life, every day he rises to a new level, mainly of understanding Hashem, and therefore he rises to a new level of serving Hashem. And there's no end to this because Hashem is infinite. V'zeu Shomer Azal, page 103. And this is what our sages said. There's a pasuk that says that Moshe bowed down to the ground. And the Gemara asks, what did he suddenly see that he bowed down to the ground? And the Gemara answers, Midas Emesra. He saw God's attribute of truth. In other words, he saw the true understanding of Hashem's infinite greatness. And when he saw that, he was overwhelmed. Who could stand before Hashem's absolute truth? As it's explained in another place. We'll skip the parentheses, that's just a reference. Our sages said, the Medrash Rabbah Pasuk, Shor Oy Kesev. So our sages say, page 104, really, even a tzaddik is not serving Hashem properly. But Hashem says, when I demand of you, I'm only demanding of you according to your potential. There's a Medrash that says, Hashem is different than a king of flesh. Kings of flesh, and not only kings, but many people are like that. That if something is easy for them, that's what they demand of the other person, without recognizing that, don't compare, maybe they're not like you. If for them it's easy, then therefore they expect it to be easy for the other person. You find it sometimes with parents and children, you find it with a husband and wife, you find it with teacher and students, that they just don't understand it. I remember I was once speaking to the principal of a school where there was a child, wasn't a child, he was already in high school. He was always coming late. And the mother asked me to speak to the principal, to intervene. And I said to him, he's having difficulty getting up in the morning. He laughs at me, how can you have difficulty? You just get up, that's it. Interesting. How can you have difficulty? There are people that have difficulty getting up in the morning. There's no difficulty, just get up. Obviously, he was a very disciplined person, or maybe he didn't have the struggle in the first place. He just woke up and jumped out of bed and did what he had to do, but he didn't have the ability to understand that there are people that have difficulty and a struggle, whether it's to get up in the morning, a struggle to concentrate, a struggle to retain the information and remember what he studied. Not everybody is the same. So I would think Hashem, who's infinite, the distance between him and us is absolutely as infinite as we can't even imagine, and yet he understands us fully because he's our creator. So Hashem doesn't demand of us according to his capacity, he demands of us according to our capacity. Only according to our capacity.
I mean, but so what's the thing about lacking then? I mean.
That's true.
we have to still
We're not
be
saying,
ourselves.
the lacking part about the tzaddik is not saying that Hashem is upset with the tzaddik or blaming the tzaddik. It's just bringing out the point that the tzaddik is constantly rising higher and higher in Aveda. When you interpret Avera literally, then that means it's a sort of a criticism of the tzaddik. Look what he did. He violated something in Torah. Most people understand Averas of a tzaddik that in a subtle way they did do something wrong, but not the way you understand it in Tanya. Tanya, even a Beinoni doesn't do anything wrong. So what does an Avera mean? It means there's something lacking in terms of reaching a certain place in Aveda. But at that time when it was done, that was where we was holding. A day later, a new level, now there's a new Aveda.
What about like in the line with Amy, it says that Tzaddik was forced by God forbid illness, he couldn't learn, so in a way it's a lacking. So here he was forced by
I have to look up the Mamar to see what it says. So so really, if we really consider Hashem's true greatness, not only this tzaddik or that tzaddik, but nobody, no human being could serve Hashem properly. So therefore, we shouldn't be frustrated about this part, and we shouldn't be down because of this, because Hashem is not demanding of us to do the Aveda according to his capacity. Hashem says, do it with your attribute, with your level of truth. But nevertheless, even though that's the case, from time to time, when a person wants to recognize the distance between him and Hashem, he'll think about it. And he'll think about how true Hashem is saying, I'm allowing you to be this way. It's okay. I'm not demanding more of you. But still, he recognizes how far he is and how distant his avodah is from really serving Hashem. The kolshkein kishim is beinin, especially when he thinks that his avodah and ki materi mitzvah is not even according to his own standards of truth. That's when it really hits him. But if that wouldn't be the case, he's thinking that it's not according to the standards of truth of Hashem, and that makes him feel this feeling of humility.
Meaning like for a Rav, right? Like if you ask like someone's sick, God forbid.
Mashpia, yeah, that's what a mashpia is.
But the Rav says you don't have to do this and this, and then the person fails. So
Yep. There's a story recently that was published. This statement is based on a saying of the sages, which is Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba betrunya imbriyaso, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't come to his creation with demands that are overwhelming. Unfortunately, many people find that working in a place with an employer that they demand things that are more than you can handle. And the same could be, like I said, with teacher and students and other kind of relationships. Hashem doesn't demand of us more than we can. So there was an interesting story someone wrote. Maybe you can ask Mrs. Jacobson about it, but the story happened with her father when he was in Russia. He had a dream. And in the dream, he dreamt the previous Rebbe was there. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's more details to the dream, but just this detail, the Frierdiker Rebbe told him to learn the Mamar that starts with these words, to learn it by heart, or to learn it. Maybe it was to learn it by heart. He woke up, and it was very vivid. It was exciting. A chassid sees the Rebbe's face in a dream. Years ago, chassidim would make a suda. They would make a meal to celebrate the fact that it had the merit to see the Rebbe's face in the dream. But here it was more than just a face. The Rebbe actually told him to do something. And very often we have such dreams, not very often, but people have such dreams. But when they wake up, they can't remember what it was. It was something nice, but I can't remember what it was. He woke up and he remembered what the dream is. But he was very disappointed because people told him there's no such Mamar.
Oh.
Whoever knew the Mamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe said there is no such Mamar. No such Mamar from the Frierdiker Rebbe. So whenever he met somebody new, he said, would you know, is there a Mamar from the Frierdiker Rebbe that starts with these words that Hashem doesn't come to a person with overwhelming demands? Never heard of such a thing. The saying is brought down in Mamar, but it's never the pasuk that starts the Mamar. In 1947, our Rebbe came to France, to Paris, to arrange that the Rebbe Tzachana, his mother, should be able to come to New York. And the Rebbe was there for a few months. I think it was from Adar until the Rebbe came back Chof Ches Sivan to America. So the Rebbe was there, and he ended up being the person who was like serving the Rebbe, taking care of things and organizing things. It's the Rebbe's son-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe this question. He asked the Rebbe this question: is this such a Mamar? The Rebbe looked at him and said, how do you know? He said, I had this dream. He said, well, this Mamar was just published. There's a book of Mamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which is called Sefer Mamar Yiddish. This is a book of Mamar which has a very interesting history to it. It was published in Yiddish only during the years of the war. It started when the war started and ended when the war ended. The 5 years from 1940 to 1945. And over there, just then, there was a Mamar that said, it happened to happen here. I'm giving it to you. And I think it was even the manuscripts of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he said that you study it, get to know it by heart, and give it back to me. To know the accurate story, ask Mrs. Jacobs, that's her father. She'll tell
What
you.
was his name?
Rabbi Lipsker. Yankel Lipsker. He's the father, if you know any Rabbi Lipsker, he's the father of all those Lipskers. Not really. They're cousins and cousins, yeah. Can I know? Okay. So the Eibusher doesn't demand of us that, but nevertheless, sometimes a person just thinks about it to realize how distant my avodah is in order to generate the feeling of humility. Page 105. How much more so when in his avodah there are inappropriate thoughts or other thoughts that distract him from his davening and his learning, then surely it's not the way it should be. It's interesting that something which for most people is like the most normal thing in the world, these people have to meditate and try to think back. Was there ever a time that during davening I had thoughts that distracted me? Especially if you can find something in his speech or his actions or his thoughts that were not the way it should be. And by doing that, that's really distancing yourself from Hashem. So when he thinks about all this, whether it's this reason or that reason, but he realizes I'm distant from Hashem for one reason or another. Because he feels that sense of bitterness, and he cries out bitterly. And of course, the purpose is not the bitterness and the crying. The purpose is that this generates a very strong feeling and desire, and the person feels motivated to do everything he can to be connected. We actually know that the desire to connect when you're at a distance is much stronger than the desire to connect when you're close. That's the meaning of the nigun Tzamach Hanafshi. What does Tzamach Hanafshi mean? David HaMelech said, my soul was thirsty for you, and my flesh was thirsty for you. Where? In a desert, because it's a desert, and because I was far from you. It's like Begashmi is when a person is in the city and they didn't drink any water for a long time. They know they didn't drink water, they're a little bit thirsty. But when a person's in a desert, the same amount of time, but they're in a desert, and they have no idea when they'll ever get out, and they're thirsty for water, the thirst is so much stronger because it's distant from them. So the thirst for godliness becomes greater because I realize the distance. Okay, we will stop here.
Question,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's only peripheral to the discussion about the tefillin. You know how it says about the talus that it's like showing off because women are not commanded, so she would put on a talus and be showing off. Is that the same with tefillin?
Yeah, I mean, depends who does it and what their motive is.
Then there's the thing that I don't, I'm assuming also, but there's also some kind of like error to the.
Right, but it depends really what the motive is, because very often you find the women who are running to put on film, they don't do the mitzvahs that women are supposed to do. They only want to do the mitzvah, that's better. But the motive is.